Hey guys, thanks for joining. So this meeting is basically the Hush meets GitHub meeting, and Manish and I've been talking about the importance of repo and source control, and how it cuts across engineering, machine learning, data science concerns, documentation, you name it. There's a lot of stuff that we have to keep in perfect sync. And right now, Git is the best mechanism for that, I believe, for all our code, etc. And then I believe GitHub is the best platform. I talked earlier about, I came from Salesforce, and at Salesforce our official internal repo system was GitHub. It was a GitHub Enterprise offering that they made, where they basically let Salesforce run instances internally, or at least in their own internal cloud. And so they did that because Salesforce is this multi-billion-dollar company. Like, they can afford to get the best tools, and GitHub was the best tool for a lot of different reasons. And I think, like, it's kind of remarkable now, like with what Microsoft is offering with GitHub. Like, it's really leveled up. Like, you can get a lot of private resources there. It's really good for hosting web pages, and it's a really good way for us to kind of share information and assets back and forth in a pretty secure fashion. Arguably, I think, like, what they do is more secure than if we were all on the same local network together. So keep that in mind. Like, we're pushing this forward because I think, like, I'm just saying that GitHub is going to serve you through your whole career, because it's basically what people use even when they're building multi-billion-dollar clouds that service the whole earth. So I think, like, with all that said, I wanted to jump right into it and talk about what we're going to do. I'm going to do a screen share here briefly. I've got GitHub skills on the left. I've got my terminal here on the right. And I do think we're going to do some terminal work here, because I think it's the most direct way to interact with Git. And then I would also say, like, follow along if you can. And I kind of, like, think as an engineer, you should fall in love with your terminal. You can see how crazy mine is. For instance, it's just I've got different, virtual sessions here. I've got the battery, I've got my name, I've got the date. Like, this is honestly like my desktop for most days. Like, if I'm coding, this is all I'll see. And then when I work in here, I'll work in, on the work on the blog, and my editor is also just the terminal. So there's so much you can do from a terminal now. It's crazy. And the greatest thing about working from a terminal is you always have it, pretty much no matter what. You don't have to, you can very easily SSH into another server and reproduce this pretty much exactly. So that said, feel free to talk to me about terminal stuff. I don't want to make that part of the main deal today, though. But I do
I
want you
have a
guys to
question.
go. Oh,
I
sure,
have a
go ahead.
question on that. So
Yeah.
for the terminal stuff, are there any specific, I would say, cheat sheets, etc., you would recommend the team that they should use so that they can learn really quickly if they're not a terminal expert?
Yeah, what I'll do is, there's a first of all, I have I'll tell them what I have a different terminal app, which I highly recommend, called Kitty. And then I'll give a breakdown of what I have and why I recommend and why. And then I'll share some configuration and preferences, which will give the same look. And then, but yeah, that's all the further I take it, because I mean, you're looking at, like, decades of knowledge and tweaks and stuff. So I can't cover that all in
Yeah, no,
one
no,
go.
absolutely. I think it's really. I think we can do a deep dive on that. I would like, an internal session that I would love to start is, like, how do you become a 10x engineer, or how do you become a
Mhm.
10x data engineer? How do you become a 10x ML researcher? Like, we should start some sort of series of around that, so that way the team can contribute towards building, something that is awesome, that keeps becoming more and more awesome. Just as we have add more headcount to our engineering staff.
Yeah, I think one interesting point I could make there is that my whole, like, engineering journey, not my whole engineering journey, but a big part of it is captured in GitHub. So here I've got, let's see, I need to go to my doc files. So this is my repo that clones my environment for every machine that I own. And it covers both Linux and Mac configuration. So the first thing I do is copy this to my local machine and run it, and I can reproduce in an instant everything I know about how to write software on that machine. And it's basically my environment. And then anytime I find it's something I want to change, I said, oh, I'd rather use this tool instead of that tool. Make a change in my GitHub file for it. And then I can copy that over to 3 other machines. This is one of my biggest tricks that I've picked up. And once again, I think this is kind of advanced, but it definitely saves you time. I don't spend more than 2 seconds trying to configure my new machine, which is a miracle. And these kinds of things I can teach you how to do this. And this is, if you're working senior plus level in an engineering org, these are the tricks of the trade. So anyways, back to GitHub skills. There's a whole rabbit hole that you can go down with terminal knowledge and the power that brings. But with GitHub, you actually don't need a whole lot of terminal knowledge at all. So here on this GitHub skills page, they walk you through all the different technologies and features that they offer, both through Git and through some other like secondary technologies called, there's Markdown and then some basic HTML publishing. So they've broken this down into a number of phases. We're on like what's called the first day on GitHub. That's what we're going to be looking at today. And this is all the kind of stuff that tells you, I think it's good to have a basic understanding of what GitHub is. And then I think one of the things about GitHub that I believe is that I think it's one of the best communication platforms in existence right now because of how things can be changed and updated, and then how those can be validated and tracked and checked. Through Git, there's really, it's second to none. And so part of what Git gives you is that, if you can write documents in that format, with just plain text, it's a really good way of keeping document in check with code. And so there's a very, very cool document format called Markdown that's become very popular for this reason. And it lets you convert very easily from very basic text syntax that converts into a halfway decent looking web page. And I'll give some examples of that. And then when you've got sort of like a web page output, the HTML output, you want to host it somewhere. So GitHub has pages, and this is where you can host a website that's simple. So if you've been following us, you know that we put together a blog for Hushh, what we're calling Hushh Labs, which is what I'm running. And it's basically anything that, we want to try and evaluate and talk about publicly and say, hey, we think this has value and here's blah, blah, blah. Or, hey, we think this is dangerous. We want to be able to, say those things and then also back it up with code or with some other example. So we've started doing this. I'm not going to show we can show the blog later. I might do a edit here and add that in. But the idea is that we're building these features and technologies, and then we want to be able to, to talk about them. So that blog page is great. I'd love to have profiles of folks up there and talk about like kind of how we're learning about machine learning and technology and what it's going to look like in the future with LLMs. So I think Satyam agreed to be our guinea pig there. We'll talk a little bit about him there. But whatever you guys feel like you're learning or realizing, I think would be great to have as a blog post. And we'll be doing that blog post with GitHub pages. So that'd be great for you guys to learn. And this is something that I think I honestly think this first level of GitHub is open to all employees of Salesforce. I think we could be super hardcore about it and say, everyone must learn this, but I don't like being making that kind of edict. I would say that if you're learning these tools, you're becoming way more valuable to us. I will definitely notice and realize the power that brings, and we'll need that. So I think they're very valuable things for us to learn, to once again to coordinate, communicate back and forth asynchronously on a lot of structured text and documents and code. You'll see that GitHub goes further. This goes into a first week session, which is all the stuff coming down the pipe for engineering practice. I think like if you're not an engineer, this isn't something that, for you, but I do think like engineers should be sort of like mini wizards of GitHub. And by that, I mean, they should understand, how to handle what's called a pull request. They have to understand what a merge conflict is and what those look like and how to fix them. They'll have to understand basics of a release-based workflow. They'll have to understand how to find data across all the different pieces of information that GitHub tracks, including the commit message, including the conversation, including the project documentation. So there's a lot of stuff there that like, it's a lot of things to pull together, but like GitHub makes it the easiest that I've ever seen. So, it's something that we use basically for that purpose. And then GitHub like helps you code. So I showed how I can reproduce my terminal configuration across all the different machines. Well, it runs the virtual machine for that. So I can just plug that in and say, GitHub, launch me a machine with my configuration. And it does it. And then it's like, I'm right there. And I can develop against it. We're not ready to take that step yet, I think, as an organization. But, if folks get to the point where they've got a doc files repo like I do, like then that's a legit possibility. And then going even further, GitHub has started to add its own large language model capabilities known as Copilot. So these are AI powered code suggestions. I think like we're going to need to be smart about how we use this. I'd love to see us use it. And I know that like we're considering using some other tools like Notion and, other tools that use an LLM backed service. But I want to call to attention that the company is predicated on privacy. And so I think putting code into a third party source is a risk. And so I think like if we're trusting GitHub already with source code, then I think they make a natural choice for trusting with an LLM, as long as it's something that they're running. I don't want them to go. We'll have to look into that and make sure that it's all done on premises. But yeah, I think like it's no holds barred here. There's a ton of great tools. There's this isn't something you guys are going to be able to like conquer all at once. But there's a ton of tricks and tips and techniques, and they're changing rapidly with large language models. So those kind of push the limits in my understanding. So in any event, and then from there, it goes even further. These are automate workflows. I don't think there's really anyone in the team that can handle this right now. Like I've done workflows and deployments. I've done major deployments at Salesforce, for basically what are called global deployments of models and code. And there's things there that you need to know how to do with once we get an actual product up and running, like someone's going to have to really watch the logs and make sure that things are working correctly. That's going to be a whole nother class of engineering that someone's going to have to do. So like, oh, go ahead, Manish.
I said that's DevOps, and we need someone in the team to, jump into that role and, start operating as that. So this is an open role the team has. There's an opportunity for someone to start operating as a DevOps engineer. If you're interested in it and you're hearing this recording and the role is still open, please go talk to Justin.
Yes, please. I think there's some stuff here that's going to be cool to do. I'm actually a big DevOps person, believe it or not. In fact, I was on special teams to optimize the compiler that was used at Salesforce and even how the packages were loaded to try and save memory or to try and save computation time for running tests. I mean, it's absolutely critical. Salesforce was at one point dedicating resources to that, and I know that one of the biggest problems in Google's built on DevOps and systems. Absolutely, we have respect for it. I have respect for it, and I think like it's and I don't think anyone even sees it right now on the team. So, but I will say like it's going to be every bit as engaging, and it's going to in fact be more valuable than feature development at some point. So some of the best engineers we had ran tests and checked that everything was still working properly. And if it wasn't, then they could notify someone, in a giant, 10, 20,000 person engineering org, who messed up. So in any event, like there's a ton of stuff to learn here. We're still not, we're not ready to take that step yet, but there's another step beyond that, which is, we are going to be serious about code security, and in many different ways. One is we're going to have our servers like pen tested and said, can you hack into these? Secondly, we're going to keep all the software running internally up to date, and we're going to prove that we've done that. So once again, GitHub has a feature where you can, for each repo that tracks your code, you can check in the file that tracks the package versions, and GitHub will check those package versions against known flaws and flag your repo and say, hey, you've got these flaws. So having a clean check there is basically another huge sign that the engineering team has done its due diligence, and it's a huge vote of confidence in the quality of the work. And I think that's another bona fide that we can offer as an engineering organization, just proving that our software is clean of flaws from outdated packages. And then, there's a lot of things here. This is sort of this is maybe not even the final level for being an engineer, and highly senior engineer. But like you keep learning new things, you keep picking up new things, and you keep affecting a larger part of the world with your work. And it's kind of an awesome feeling, but that means you also have to submit to these checks and to say, yes, this is done correctly. So I want to see our engineers get there. And I know we've gone way into the weeds here, but I wanted to go as far down this path as I could go and just say, like, look, this is where you guys need to go. Like we're wandering around the weeds here. Like, I don't want you to waste time. Like, head this way. Like, Manish and I have seen the top of the mountain. Like we know what this looks like when it's good. And so I think, like, keep all that in mind. And I promise you is the gentlest introduction to this that you'll have. So this page right here, going back to this page, I would recommend, we'll go through a couple of these, but I wanted to explain kind of like how this worked. Each one of these is actually repos in and of itself. And it has this special format. It will give you an introduction, and it will say, who's this for, what you'll learn, making a markdown file, and then all the different things that you need to do. So what you'll do is you'll just click start this course, and it will ask you to, it'll actually clone this to your local repo there as a new repo name. This one's giving me a warning because I've already done this. I've actually got this set up already. It's actually here. And when you clone it, what'll happen is you'll notice that this is changed from the original template. But now this is going to give you a very easy tutorial lesson in GitHub format for their pages. And they'll talk about how to update a README and walk you through the steps of where to click and how to create the branch, and then how to add that back into your repo. And if you follow these steps, like we'll all be able to show this off. We'll all have an updated README. So you can see mine. I did something very simple at some point, just giving, this is my personal README that I did from GitHub. So that's just basically the first baby step, is just sort of how to do your own profile using Git. But it also gives you really good baby steps for Git. So the other I'll create new tabs for this. The other important feature here is Markdown. So this is going into this documentation format, which once again is very simple. In fact, all these READMEs are written in Markdown, but they have nice looking headers. They have bullet points that work right. There's even some fancier image assets you're able to do. There's hyperlinks. But this kind of document is just really pleasant to read. It's just like, if you guys are sending me an update on a pull request, or if you're just sending me some code and I'm just like, look, what's this about? Like, I don't want to read a wall of text. Like, break it down. Say, like, here's the, make a structured document for me. And I don't want you to spend a whole lot of time on it, but like, at least I think Markdown is kind of like, just add some basic headers. Give me some header overviews and let me visually index from them. Make some bullet points, add some links to, secondary information, just very basic organizational stuff. And Markdown, gives you that. And they make it a first class feature of the repo, in fact. So every repo, when you click on it, communicate using Markdown, any repo, or I would say not any, but 99% of the repos in GitHub have something called README in a Markdown format. So you can go to this, and GitHub will always helpfully, render this into nice HTML for you, but you can look at this raw. And so Markdown is once again, a plain text format. So this is something now you can edit in a terminal if you want, or an editor, or whatever you want. But this is not a Google Doc. It's not a PDF or anything like that. It's just raw text that's rendered in a certain way. So it's very easy to edit, and then because it's raw text, it's very easy for GitHub to track it. And you can do that with, you can go to this individual file. And I always like to look at, with GitHub, there's all these tools that are based on the lines of code. And so one of the things you can do that's nice with online here is you can see who wrote what very quickly. So this is that same file, but broken down by line now. And you can see that, who wrote that part and when. So it's a really good way of, like, if you see like part of the code you don't understand, or if you see part of the code that's causing problems, it's good because it indexes by who wrote it. And so you can immediately go back to them and say, hey, what did this do? Because otherwise it's just, with a bigger organization, you can't just rely on word of mouth anymore for anything. So you've got all these different features that then are integrated in the website as well. This makes it super easy to share. So if I want to say, like, hey, like, I wrote some documentation, I'd offer a pull request, but I'd be like, look, you can just check it out here on GitHub as a page. And I should also mention if you go through here, through my GitHub repos, go back over here, you'll see, actually, let me jump over here. You'll see that we have our Hushh Labs site here. And this has all the different projects that I have done or shared are tracked here. And it's just a combination of apps and experiments, and then also this blog site. So in this blog site, I'm using another form of Markdown called Quarto. And Quarto is a scientific and technical publishing system. So these were different things that I wanted to use to, structure information. And it's very, very powerful. In fact, like, so all this stuff is Quarto. There's these different files here, but in Quarto can render to HTML the way Markdown can. So it's kind of like turbocharged Markdown. And we can go in through the Google Pages here, and you can see that it's rendered the entire thing into this pretty nice web page. And it's nice for a blog, and it's good enough because we can insert some images. It has full search, so you can search for, you can do simple keyword search. It's got an RSS feed, it's got categories, it's also got the ability to do static pages, of course. So here's a picture of us hanging out in Seattle and down by the University Yacht Club. That was awesome. And so it's sort of like, with Markdown, you can do these simple GitHub pages, but with Quarto now you can generate whole websites programmatically. So that's something that I think is really useful, since we're using it already for the blog. But if we ever produce something like Rohan's, maybe we produce some kind of like superior on-device clip package or something like that. And if we do in fact choose to document it, like Cordo is the way to go. Like it'll generate documentation sites, it'll generate, whatever you want. But Markdown is a simpler version of that. And it's part of, once again, it's part of a trajectory. It's part of like a series of technologies you can learn one after another. And each time you learn them, you level up a little bit. So Markdown's another good thing to learn. And then I already kind of talked about how Markdown's connected to Pages. So Pages is basically a way for us to serve some static images. And I've already, I've used this for the blog. I've also used this for different demos that I've shared. And it's just a way of doing sketches, I think, for static websites. And then those static websites can embed a prototype or a demo or something that we're doing from Hugging Face or whatever. It's pretty nice. So I'm trying to think, like, I think at this point, maybe let's just sort of, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recording because I know we've been recording for a while. And I think we'll just have like an open work session for 15 minutes. Let's try it. How about that? Can I get a thumbs up? All right.